How's it going, everyone? My name is Redadupe, and I want to introduce a new series of mine I'd like to call Monster Bites. Monster Bites is a new series I'm making where I give my personal opinion about the monsters of the Monster Hunter universe. I cover topics like my favorite monsters, my most disliked monsters, all the stuff that's in between those lines, and little bite-sized pieces of information about each monster that I cover. On that note, let's talk about today's monster. Pukei-Pukei is a bird wyvern that shares characteristics with reptiles, most commonly associated with chameleons, with beautiful looking feathers and scales that do change colors depending on the mood of the Pukei-Pukei. While under normal circumstances, the Pukei-Pukei is usually displaying your blues and greens and more of the cooler variety of colors. Though, when it does become enraged, it starts displaying more of the warmer colors like your reds and oranges. The Pukei-Pukei is a poisonous monster, and when it's upset, it reminds me a lot of when reptiles in nature are warm and colorful and with very distinct patterns to show other creatures that they are poisonous. The thing I absolutely love about Pukei-Pukei is that it can take environmental plants, eat them, and add special properties to its poison attacks. For instance, the Spore Puff. For hunters, it's a great tool for the monsters to lose sight of them, with its fog-like spores that cover the area and conceal the hunter. For the Pukei-Pukei, though, it turns its slimy poison into a cloud of poison that lingers in the vicinity for a little bit and poisons anyone that enters it. Another environmental food that Pukei-Pukei likes to eat is the scatter nut. The scatter nut can give their poison attacks more of a concussive effect, that when it does hit the hunter, gives you the stun status. And you cannot convince me otherwise that Pukei-Pukei's eating scatter nuts is just the human equivalent of pop rocks. The way the attack patterns of the Pukei-Pukei change based on what it eats reminds me a lot of the Kongolala from the older games, where depending on what mushroom the Kongolala eats determines what his breath attack becomes. When normally the Kongolala has a poo breath attack as its main breath weapon, by consuming a toadstool, his breath weapon turns into a poison attack. Though Pukei-Pukei does take this to a more advanced level. After the Pukei-Pukei has consumed any type of food, its sac under its chin will inflate, kind of like a frog's vocal sac. The Pukei-Pukei's mouth is not the only orifice that he can expel poison from either, as its tail can emit a poison cloud similar to when it eats a Spore Puff, though I've only seen it use this attack when it has a swollen tail, and thereby severing its tail completely negates its ability to use its poison tail attack, and automatically deflates the tail once severed. Normally when a monster gets weakened, it usually goes back to its nest to sleep and recover health, but I have never seen a Pukei-Pukei sleep in the ancient forest while weakened. Mostly it just goes back to its nest and consumes bones. Though in the Wild Spiral Waste, you do get to see the Pukei-Pukei sleeping. And I'm not kidding, I sat here for like 2 minutes just watching the Pukei-Pukei eat these bones and then just proceed to not sleep. And Pukei-Pukei does eat more than just scatternuts and spore puffs. It does eat more environmental food, though I have not seen any change in its poison behavior from eating said foods. Oddly enough, the Pukei-Pukei can also be seen eating stones, which is a common occurrence in some bird and reptile species to aid in digestion when they lack the teeth to grind their own food down. And then they produce what is called a gizzard stone or gastrolith. Another noticeable feature about the Pukei-Pukei is how long its tongue is. And though it does use its tongue in a lot of attacks, in Master Rank you can see it using its tongue to eat the scatter nuts from the vines up top without it having to fly up to said vine. Pukei-Pukei does make another appearance in Monster Hunter Rise, though I do like World's Pukei-Pukei just a bit more than I do like Rise's for a couple of reasons. In Rise, the Pukei-Pukei can eat any of the plants and still get some of the effects from like the Spore Puff or the Scatternut, which completely takes the environmental part out of the equation, and that was a huge thing I really loved about it in World. Though one thing I do appreciate that Rise did is that when you sever a Pukei-Pukei's tail, it can still use its poison gas attack from it, though at a severely reduced range. Rise also introduced a couple of new attacks for Pukei-Pukei, one which is running around and shooting poison blobs everywhere, while the other attack is a poison cloud it spews from its mouth that covers a wide frontal cone. So yeah, that's the Pukei-Pukei, and in my opinion, the best monster that came out of Monster Hunter World. But before I end this episode, let me showcase a couple more Pukei-Pukei weapons besides the sword and shield. Being a lanceman, I'd be beside myself if I didn't show off the lance. I love the feather design on the lance and the shield itself, with the Pukei-Pukei tail as the handle of the lance. Comparing it to something like the Kulu-Yaku lance, where the blacksmith just basically threw a Kulu condom over the iron spike and called it a day. I want to talk about the hammer just for one reason, besides it being a beautiful freaking weapon. It also is just a ripoff of Monster Hunter 3 using Numbing Bird, to the point where even the Gobble spikes pop out when you charge the weapon up. Thank you so much. I absolutely love Monster Hunter. I've been a huge fan of it since I played Freedom 2 on the PSP, and I've just played every iteration that came to America ever since. If you're a fan of Monster Hunter or just enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment down below giving your opinion on the subject. And with all this said, enjoy the hunt.